This episode was sponsored by Property, the leading real estate agent for all real estate transactions with a comprehensive ecosystem. They combine highly trained experts with the latest technologies on an intelligent platform to provide clients, brokers, and service partners with risk-free, flexible, and simplified services. Learn more at property.com. That's property with an I.com.
So you're prepared for everything. You got lawyers who take care of these things. You might have M&A advisors and so on, and you structure the deal and you do everything. And then, it's the signing and there's so much going on, preparing for the closing. And then you finally are having the closing, and then you have to do the press work, and then silence.
Welcome to the Swisspreneur Show, a podcast about startup stories and learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. If you enjoy listening to our show, make sure to follow the podcast and leave a rating. And now, here's your host, Silvan.
Ronnie, a very well welcome to the Swisspreneur Show. It's not only a big pleasure, but also an honor to have you as a guest today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for hosting me. As we are friends for quite some time, we finally made it.
It took some convincing, but I'm glad we're here today together.
Yes, thanks so much.
You are an entrepreneur through and through, co-founder of Notime and also of 10 additional companies. You were the first investor and employee of Money Park, and currently you're also the president of EO, the entrepreneurs organization of the Zurich chapter. It's quite a CV that you bring to the table. And if you look at your entrepreneurial career of almost 2 decades of successful entrepreneurship, you sort of became an entrepreneur. But just hypothetically speaking, if you didn't become an entrepreneur, if you hadn't become an entrepreneur, what would you be doing today?
Well, I had a life before becoming an entrepreneur. So after my studies in St. Gallen and Singapore, I worked in consulting for some time. Nevertheless, I believe. And then I also did what most consultants do at some point. I kind of switched to one of my clients. But I felt that I kind of was, probably unemployable. Because I didn't play politics. I hate politics. What usually happens if organizations grow to a certain size, then politics starts to matter. And I was always interested in what's important and the right things to do for the company, not for the people. That hit me. Basically also got fired because of such things. Yeah, in the end, I would say I'm probably unemployable.
It's interesting because we've heard that from other guests that said, I tried being an employee, but it didn't work. I became unemployable. Was then entrepreneurship really the logical and sort of also only thing to do?
I always felt already during my studies that I was always a free spirit. Even my teachers at primary or high school told me you're a free spirit. And I always did things the way I wanted to do things. And during my studies, I always believed that I want to become an entrepreneur, but I never had the idea on how would I start a company. So I always felt like, okay, I'm missing the idea, and I don't know what to do. I want to do like a succession as an entrepreneur. That's why I also went into consulting, because I thought that's going to give me a good overview on how companies are run and where the mistakes are and so on in different areas, different industries, different geographies. Yeah, that was my original plan. And then things came together due to the fact that also my mom passed away suddenly, and that gave quite a dent in my life. Then one thing led to another. I met some people, and then, it started off. To be very honest, that wouldn't have been possible just to do like that without my wife. My wife was very supportive, really fed me. I didn't make any money at the beginning, just invested everything we had into companies, and she basically fed me. So without her, it wouldn't have been possible too. But it was kind of like the logical step. And I don't know, we call it destiny, but it's something that just happened and somehow it clicked.
And also many things coming together at the same time and at the right time. The setup that you just described together with your wife, can you talk a bit more about that? Because I think that's very inspiring. Many people think, I need to make some money. Of course, we all have bills to pay, but sometimes there's a different setup that is possible. How did you do that in the early days?
A really lucky guy. I mean, I met my wife during my studies. She's 7 years younger than I am. And we met during studies. She's really a smart kid. And she started working for McKinsey right after university, and she's still there working right now as a partner. And that made it possible that there was enough cash flow for me to kind of participate in that. So the idea is more like what we internally agreed is more like she's responsible for the cash flow and I'm responsible for the upside. And nice. Down the line, it somehow then changed also a bit that there's also some cash flow from my side, of course, but that was the initial setup. And I mean, I was very lucky to be able to do that to an extent that was that extreme, where I really said I don't need any salary at the beginning at all. And that's for most people not possible. That's really thanks to my wife, and that's because I'm not coming from a rich background or anything. That's not that I could just afford doing that. It was really teamwork. Until this day, I know really, really, really well what my wife was doing and is still doing for me. Mm-hmm. And as a team, that's really just amazing that you're like able to go through life like this.
That also makes you a real strong team, as you just said. And also for you as a co-founder of companies, that gives you a very different leverage, so to speak, because maybe your co-founders, they have not the same setup. They need some cash flow. So you could then potentially even negotiate higher shares because you don't need any salary in that sense.
Yes, that was also the case sometimes.
Amazing.
And I mean, that was nice. But also on the other way, on the other hand, you have to really be aware that, I mean, it can go both ways. I mean, you can generate upside or it's just a downside,
That's the thing with upside.
So yeah, of course. That was, I mean, I could play this in a way that was most extreme because of this situation. And I mean, also here, having a good education, having degrees from St. Gallen and from Singapore, I mean, I wasn't like afraid of not getting a job if it doesn't work. But to be very honest, I always doubted that I will really find a job in terms of where I could really thrive, because everyone who knows me would agree that I'm really an independent spirit, and that would probably have been rather hard not being like my own boss.
Mm-hmm. So in that sense, it was clear you had to become an entrepreneur, but often entrepreneurship is also a bit over romanticized. You think, oh, it's so cool, you're a free spirit and everything, but entrepreneurship is also a very lonely journey. That's one of the key topics we want to talk with you about today. Mm-hmm. What makes entrepreneurship such a lonely journey for the founders or the CEOs or whoever is involved there?
So the thing with being your own boss is also that you're the ultimate decision taker. And that to some degree makes it lonely. Very lonely, because in the end, it's you who decides. And that gives a lot of responsibility. And with this also goes a lot of thinking. I mean, these things sometimes weigh really a lot on your shoulder. I remember when I got out of notime, I felt like relieved, like a ton of weight was from my shoulders, because in the end, you're responsible for all at that point of time, several hundred employees we had. And that was somehow, that's a responsibility you can physically feel sometimes. Mm-hmm. And also other stories. I mean, people are not aware that, for example, if you have a startup, especially if you have like a venture where you just burn money, then you know exactly when you're running out of it, and that keeps you up at night and doesn't, all these things. What I find in most of these like startup events these days is it's all glamour. And to be very honest, most of the entrepreneurial journey is not glamour at all. It's sleepless nights, and sometimes you're like really anxiety to like you go bust or bankrupt, and what does it mean for my, image out there, and so on and so forth. So I think that's to me what's over. It's always the cases that win that are displayed, and there are many cases that don't work out.
Way more.
Yes,
actually.
Of course. And I think that's why, to me, it sometimes felt very, very lonely. Mm-hmm. And still does. And that's, to me, for example, where really EO as an organization helped me out because I found people who are in the same situation who can really understand what you're going through and how it feels, and can actually share experience that how they manage to deal with these situations. And I think that's really what can help.
What about your co-founders? Is that also something that helps, or does it still make you lonely because all of you have different areas where you actually feel lonely because you have different responsibilities usually?
It can be both. I think in certain situations, it's good that you can discuss, decision making, of course. Nevertheless, all the founders are individuals and they have all individual life circumstances. Talking about, how are you financially set up? So sometimes you might get an opportunity of, for example, exiting a company or partly sell it or getting strategic investors aboard. And people tend to favor different solutions because of different life circumstances. And that also doesn't make life easier. So here again, then you can feel very lonely because you have a different setup than somebody else. But in certain situations, of course, it can help. And also seen, as soon as there's really money in the game, people tend to become a bit different.
Definitely. You mentioned EO as an organization that helps you to deal and cope with this loneliness. What are other factors or people who can help you on that journey? Like your wife, for example, maybe a therapist, coaches, family. I don't know. What helped you to really also handle this pressure combined with the loneliness?
Okay, my wife, of course, I can talk to her about a lot of things. Also, the problem here, even though she's very intelligent, but if you have never been in the situation, it's very hard to grasp and to understand. So, and certain things I didn't want her to burden with, because in the end, she has a very tough job. She's not like 9 to 5 working, and she has things of her own to really take care and think about. And you don't come home and say, I think we're running out of money and I don't know whether whether we'll go bust and stuff. I didn't want to really put that weight on her shoulders too. So about these things, I didn't really talk to her. About a lot of other things, yes, sometimes certain decisions you have to take in terms of HR or stuff like that, of course. But these really, the toughest ones probably, I couldn't talk to her. So there, for me, really the most helpful thing is people who already been there or who have the same struggle. So that's really, to me, I always tell people, if they ask me about EO, I always say the best decision or the best thing that happened to me in my life was my wife. The second was becoming an entrepreneur, and the third was becoming an EO member, because it really helped me a lot. It made me a more reflected person. It made me also a better entrepreneur. And overall, I would say also a better human being. And that's really something that's you cannot measure in terms of value. That's just unvaluable. And I think it's very hard to get to this point in another way, especially as an entrepreneur, because very few people can understand what you're actually going through.
Yeah. And I fully second that. That's also how we met originally.
Yes.
And so many good things came out of that. And I feel not only people who are also entrepreneurs who fully grasp and understand what you're going through, but also people who have been in the same situation for the decision that you're about to make, maybe 2-3 years ahead of you. That's the most valuable input that you can get as an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. And, I see it one way like this, where I had people who have been going through the same thing before. And then I saw in my own forum, which is the format of EO that you meet once a month with your peers, people who had the same things two years after me, for example, who exited and then went through the same phases that I went. And that was very interesting to see that you have these, even though, the businesses are different, the psychology behind things, for example, after exit or something like that, are the same things that happen. And that's very interesting. And on the other hand, it's great, because then you can really be of help to other people, or they can be of help to you. And
exactly.
that's really cool.
And talking about the exit, that's actually a very good point. Usually we think about the journey of getting to an exit is lonely, but then also after the exit, there's something even called the post-exit depression. Tell us a bit more about that, because you went through that 2 times, once with Money Park, once with Notime. What happened to you as an entrepreneur after you sold the company? How did your life change?
Yeah, I think everyone always is aspiring to do an exit. I don't know whether an exit is really something to aspire for. I mean, sometimes I feel like, and luckily at the point where I now have companies that are not something I want to exit. Mm-hmm. They're cash generating, they're paying dividends, and that's, a very, very good and nice model too. So an exit is not the only thing to do with a company. And I think that's also very important for all the startup guys out there. A startup is not about an exit. Sometimes that happens. It happened to me even more than 2 times with exits, but there was somebody who wanted to buy the company. Yeah, well, fair enough. Okay, then that's a decision among the founders and the investors, whether they want to do that or not. Mm-hmm. So what then happens, so you're prepared for everything. You got lawyers who take care of these things. You might have M&A advisors and so on, and you structure the deal and you do everything. And then, it's the signing, and then you have there's so much going on, preparing for the closing. And then you finally are having the closing, and then you have to do the press work. And then silence. Then you got money on your bank account. And then it's silence. So there are 2 ways. Either you continue working, mm-hmm. but it changes fundamentally, because now you're an employee in your company, and you never wanted to be an employee, because that's exactly why you become an entrepreneur. So the situation really changes. Or it might be that you leave the company, mm-hmm. and then, until then, everything, like your company was like a child of yours. And your whole purpose was to build that company. And you might have been dreaming of exiting it at some point, but then you kind of lose your purpose. Then everyone, and the thing on top of that is everyone around you thinks, wow, this guy now just exited and he made a lot of money, and he must be the most lucky guy on the planet, and he must be so happy. And yet you feel like totally lonely and totally lost, because you lost your purpose. And on top of that, so then all the banks start calling and writing, and and you start really wondering on, okay, what do they really want from me? So all of a sudden you feel like, okay, now they understand. When you go as a startup, you go to a bank, they say, it's very nice that you came to us, but no thanks.
Of course.
And as soon as they understand that you made some money, that's the next thing that happens. I mean, it's the banking model. That's fair enough. And you need support at some points or stuff like that. Yeah. That's also totally legitimate, but the perspective changes. And the same around, with friends or people around you, if they realize or know what happened, they start looking differently at you. Mm-hmm. I also lost friends due to the fact that they felt they couldn't keep up with me, even though I personally believe in and really good friends and old friends tell me I didn't change. I'm still the same guy. And, all these combined is really something, especially the purpose, where you don't know what to do with the rest of your life. Let's imagine you're like, I was end of 30 or beginning 40, even, mid 40s or end of 40s. You still have like 25, 30, 35 years to go. Mm-hmm. What do you do now? And that's really something where a lot of people start to struggle. And really, it might be like a bit of a midlife crisis, where you really start wondering, okay, what's next and what's still to do? And I mean, there are people who fell into this trap and started doing nothing anymore and just spending the money. I mean, some of them can afford to spend it until the end of their life. The problem is what's it doing with your brain? What's it doing with your body, and so on? And so refinding a new purpose is really something that's, for most of people, really the biggest challenge. And that's why I'd say no one is really prepared for that, because you prepare just for the fact that until you get the money in the bank, right?
Of course.
But after that, no one is prepared.
And I feel it's also difficult because people can tell you that, but then you're so focused on closing the deal. And it feels almost like you have to really experience that yourself until you fully get it, what it means.
Yes, I mean, I think certain learnings in life you can only learn when doing it themselves.
No.
Yes, that's true. That's true. And I've seen it, with several people in my like close friends who had exits who went through the exactly same stages than I did. And that's really interesting to see. And I think that's something I don't know that this is like large or widely talked about. Because you should feel like a hero or whatever, but you really don't.
Yeah, that's a big discrepancy, right? That's the image that society or your peers have on you. They think you made money, you exited the company, amazing. And that's such a big difference to how you feel in that moment. Often you just feel tired or empty and you're like, okay, what is next? Like my purpose is gone. This episode was co-produced with EO Zurich, a branch of the Entrepreneurs Organization. EO is the world's only peer-to-peer network exclusively for entrepreneurs. It helps transform the lives of those who transform the world. On May 6, 2025, at Europa in Zurich, EO Zurich will be hosting the Entrepreneurs Summit, an event by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs, focusing on the topic of loneliness in the startup world. Expect high-caliber keynotes and open discussions about the difficult personal situations of some of Switzerland's most successful entrepreneurs. There are 150 seats available, and the event is open to both EO members and to outsiders who fit the EO criteria. Head on over to entrepreneurs-summit.ch to learn more. How did you go about finding a new purpose? How long did that take, and how did you do it, basically?
For me, it took, a year and a half. Yeah. And it's really a process. And I think there's no way of speeding it up.
No.
Because the difference is now you're much, much more picky because you can afford it. And the second thing is also, a lot of people start thinking about their own reputation. Said, okay, now I did this. If I do something new and it's not working out, then it's going to hit my reputation or something like that. Or my, like to put it like a bit more modern, like my street cred, So, and I think that's really something. And if as you grow older, you get different, of course, too. And you're probably a bit more risk averse and you're not like this happy-go-lucky, let's just try everything kind of guy. And I think there's no way of accelerating that. It has to grow inside of you, and you have to, I think the most important part is you have to really deal with yourself and start understanding who you are and what you want to be and what you not want to be and what you don't want to do. And it's really a journey of getting to know you better. And some people probably do it differently. They just dive in something new. That might also be the case. But for me, it was really, I learned a lot about myself. I learned much more about myself before already. After my mom passed away, I had a dark period that I went through, because not only did my mom pass away, but the evening after the funeral, one of my best friends killed himself. And so I had, and then there's one or two more events. So I had like four funerals within 3 months of people that were really close to me. And the oldest of them was 60 years old. So there was a lot to think about for me at that point of time. So I found out a lot about myself then. But nevertheless, it still took time for me to get a new purpose and to think what I really want to do and what I don't want to do.
During these periods of really getting to know yourself better, what was something surprising that came up that you did not expect that way?
To me, something, for example, that's really important. I was really thinking a lot about, okay, what's the meaning of being here? Mm-hmm. And to me, at that point, it was really clear that, I mean, we live in such an amazing country. We are safe. We have enough. We don't have to worry about having enough food or security or stuff like that. So we can really do the pursuit of happiness. And I really asked myself, I was like, okay, when am I happy? What's the definition of happiness for me? And of course, that's very philosophical. And in the end, I came to a conclusion to say, to me, happiness is good times, meaning experiences, shared with people that I love. And so you have these three elements. It's always an experience, it's always sharing, and it's always with people that are close to you somehow. And I think that was very important to me. And that can be very different things. That can be something very simple. Just watching the sunset with somebody you really like and talking about, things you love. So, or it can also be something, of course, can be a nice party or can be something else, but also simple things in life. And to me also, what I found out is doing things for other people, for example, not for myself. So I also find to myself like, okay, I need to do some things that are bigger than myself, not just for me, but something where you can leave, well, you can call it big, like a legacy. It's not a legacy in this term, but it can also, I will give you probably an example a bit later when we talk about it. But yeah, doing something like can be charity or can be, just spending time with people who are probably not as fortunate or stuff like that.
You did tell that to me when we prepared this conversation, that founders who have an exit, they also have a social responsibility. Let's dive into that. How does that express itself? Like, what is your responsibility? You said giving back, but in what way and how big, etc.? Like, what is your responsibility once you were lucky enough to make some money with your company in the exit?
So I think personally, also this is probably very Swiss, what I'm talking about. I think, we had really the opportunity of growing up in a country that's really amazing. And even here we have people who are less fortunate. And, it's not, I think it's also important to understand that even though you're probably the founder or co-founder of something, it needed a lot of good circumstances in order to, the timing had to be right. You had to kind of meet the right people. So there's always, an element of luck and an element of timing, and you need to have the right people aboard. And in the end, it's really also a matter of good teams. And in this kind of way, I think, the image that you create towards the non-entrepreneurial world, towards society, should also be that if with great success comes great responsibility, also in a societal way. And you don't have to do this very openly. For me, I'm somebody, and, we talked a lot about that. I'm not giving interviews usually. I'm doing this because I know you and because I'm president of EO at the moment. And I do a lot of things that I don't, normally talk about. And that's okay, because it's just for me. And that's something I personally believe is really important. I mean, it's not only if you had an exit, but it's particularly if you don't have to worry about, how you can feed your family anymore. Then, of course, the responsibility for my immediate surrounding, for people, not just my direct family, but for my friends or for my relatives or, or for elderly people is just becoming bigger, because I can also afford to probably spend time or invest some money or stuff like that. I think, and that's also something that makes our society here in Switzerland work.
Absolutely. And how did you specifically, sort of fulfill your social responsibility after your exits? What did you do?
For example, I financed several students from abroad to be able to study here in Switzerland, like, enfants perdus and for example, as an example, I also spend a lot of time with certain people. I can give you one example that's really close to my heart. So my best friend's older daughter was diagnosed with leukemia 2.5 years ago when she was 16. And she was really, we had a very good relationship already before. And she was really very, very worried, not of course, for her life at the beginning as well. But when she kind of started fighting, her biggest fear was that she would need to repeat like a year in high school. So, and I had a talk with her and I said, you see, I mean, you don't have to worry too much about like languages or stuff. Even whether you read the book more or less in German, that doesn't change big. But if you don't catch up in sciences, means maths, physics, chemistry, then no way you can like keep up with the class. So we kind of decided that I gonna teach her. So I spent probably around a day per week for almost a year with her homeschooling, maths, physics, chemistry. And of course, that didn't fill the entire day. But then also, we had a lot of talks about, how does it feel now? And what's happened if you would die?
Wow, that's deep.
And that's of course not talks you would normally have with a 16 or 17-year-old girl. No. Or, what if she can never become a mom? Because if you do like these therapeutics, then, chances are that this can happen. And that's usually not things you do. And that's something you really need some time to talk, and you really need a very close relationship. So it was also with her mom, with her dad, and also with her sister that I was talking at some point. So I basically could afford of doing that, because if I even invested a day a week, it was not a problem to me, because I was flexible. I had the possibility of doing it, and I was financially in a way independent that I could just say, okay, I'm doing it. And I think, and I don't want any, I don't want the reward. For me, being able to change a young person's life in that kind of way, it gives me much more satisfaction and makes me incredibly happy that this is more than enough, thanks.
Yeah, you had a very positive impact on a young person's life.
So, and it's the same thing for me even. So I understood that the best thing I can do is being an entrepreneur. So I now even, what I do now is basically also something where I give back. So because I usually, if I see talents where I believe they're entrepreneurs, they didn't really start a company yet because they doubt, they don't have enough courage or whatsoever. I have quite some ideas to start doing things. Also, I started doing private equity stuff. And so I take these people and make them co-entrepreneurs with me. And so I basically give them the idea, I give them the finances, I give them a network, I give, whatever they need. And that's, to me, of course, I can fulfill my entrepreneurial journey further, but I can also get people to kind of make the move towards entrepreneurship. And that's also, to me, a certain degree giving something back in the area where I can probably am most experienced.
And I feel it's hard to put that into words, but I very much sort of feel the satisfaction that comes out of that when you bring two people together and something great emerges out of that, or you are sort of acting as a wingman to someone and help them to find their entrepreneurial path. This is amazing. This is really making things better for these people.
Yeah, I hope. Also here, sometimes, it can be a very rocky road. And of course, then you have to fight and you struggle, and we have sometimes then really hard talks, and that's part of the game. You don't become entrepreneur overnight, and it's, in general, it's not the easiest way to move.
Of course.
So it's not the easiest way to choose, and it's something that's a constant battle mostly.
Yeah, despite loneliness, it's a constant battle.
Yes, and that's just how it is. But nevertheless, it can be, to me, honestly, it can be one of the most fulfilling things you can do. And certain people are really made for that, but they didn't have the courage probably, or didn't have the opportunity to do it. And then to get these people to really flourish, that's amazing.
Fully agree. That's also why we have Swisspreneur. That's our motivation to hopefully inspire more people to become entrepreneurs and support that.
Because honestly, it's never politics or thing that changed the world in terms of innovation. It's always the entrepreneurs. It's always probably, the scientists who really do these breakthroughs. And And I think that's very important also to understand. So I'm also politically very interested, and I do some things where we do dialogues between the economy and politics. And I think that's very important to understand, because here again, a wealth of a nation directly depends on the economy. And I totally agree. I think it was Ludwig Erhard who said economy is not everything, but everything is nothing without economy. And I think that's very important to understand. And we have a tendency to forget about that.
Yeah. There's one thing I also want to talk about, sort of the second topic. You mentioned how lucky we are that we are born in Switzerland, that we have a really great country here. And if we look at entrepreneurship, often we look to the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, to the United States. And yet there are a lot of important differences, right? So Swiss founders are often told by American investors that they need to think bigger, be more bold, more ambitious, etc. But I think that you don't necessarily agree with that statement. Why not?
I would say it depends,
Fair.
Of course. I mean, if you want to grow your company in the United States, you have to behave like the Americans. That's no question. If in Rome, do as the Romans do. So, of course, if you're in the US, then you have to behave different because mentalities are different. It's very clear. You see this from politics to social security to even if you talk to the mindset of people in the US, it's just different than here. And so if you're there, behave like they behave because that's what they expect and that makes gonna life easier. In Switzerland, I think we have a different kind of way how our society works and we have different mindsets. And I feel that in Switzerland, we have this unwritten rule where people are absolutely okay with the idea that if you take a risk and you're an entrepreneur and you're creating jobs, that at some point of time, it's okay even if you become wealthy. But then again, Swiss people don't show their wealth.
And don't brag about it.
Don't brag about it. Don't show it that much. That it's not that obvious. It's not like a competition. And I think that's very important for the glue that holds our society together. And that's an unwritten rule here in Switzerland. I really like that because it doesn't feed what we have a lot also due to social media, that it's a constant battle or competition and who has bigger, better, richer, all these things. And I think that's putting very much stress on society in general. Mm-hmm. People become greedy, people become jealous because some people can do things that they don't. And I think also here, what we do as a general society, that we don't brag about these things or that we don't display them very obviously, is an important part of why Switzerland works the way it works. And it's also here very typical Swiss.
So sort of this Swiss modesty in that sense.
Yes,
that's a core value.
Absolutely. I think also here that's a certain humbleness. And I mean, nevertheless, I'm Christian by growing up, but I'm not like a particularly strong believer or anything in religion. But, humbleness is for a reason. I mean, these guys in the Catholic Church, they have been really thinking a lot about these morals and things for thousands of years. Yeah. And it's a reason why humbleness is a cardinal virtue. I think, all these traditional values, there are something that tend to get forgotten these days, mm-hmm. but for a functioning society are really, really important. Yeah. And that's why I say, I don't agree with this American way of, here in Switzerland, in the cultural context of Switzerland, and we are really, it served us really well. And I think that's really important. And that's something I really deeply believe in.
And then on the other spectrum, we see LinkedIn, for example, as a social medium where people only show the good sides often. They show how amazing they're doing, etc. We heard and talked about that before. It's a bumpy road. It's a tough road, entrepreneurship. Do you think that founders here in Switzerland sometimes spend too much time and energy posting and pretending on LinkedIn compared to actually building the business?
Yeah, well, it's also a tough one. I think it's also here. It's a tricky answer. On one hand, of course, yes. Mm-hmm. I think whatever keeps you from building your company, get it away. So I had a lot of discussion with companies that I invested in, whether we should go to all these beauty startup contests. And I really don't believe in that, because of course I understand that if you're talking to investors, that this might give you a good reputation or whatsoever, but the amount of work you put in, or I would rather try to convince potential investors with good numbers instead of being top 750,000, I don't know what, So I think the time invested and the things got out of it is just not, it's like a beauty contest for startups. And, yet all these like Miss Switzerland contests we kind of get rid of, but with startups we still do it, and that's really interesting.
More so see. Even, yes.
That's very interesting to see, and the same with LinkedIn. I understand that LinkedIn is important, for example, for you to get good people aboard and that your company is somehow present there.
No.
To me, as long as it's the company writing something about, then I feel like, okay, yes, for sure, that's part of marketing or brand positioning or whatever. Yeah. My problem starts more when the question is it about the company or is it just about the founder? And that's where I think, are you the brand or is the company the brand? And that's where I really get problems.
Yeah. That's an ego, basically.
Yes, of course. And in the end, here again, when you see the people struggling, in general, people struggling due to the ego.
Yeah.
And of course, I know that as an entrepreneur, you need to have balls, you need to be courageous, you need to, and people come, like entrepreneurs come in all flavors and sizes and, and they're different as human beings are. But here again, I think you have a social responsibility here again, because it projects to me, and that's the biggest issue I have. It projects an image of how an entrepreneur is. That's not true, because most entrepreneurs are not like that.
True.
And the public opinion about entrepreneur might change due to that, and that they have all big egos, they have all this. And of course, we all have our egos. You probably don't start a company if you don't have a certain ego. But nevertheless, I think the entire humbleness, the entire, being grateful what you were given, or, the circumstances you were able to achieve these things is just important. So that's where I would draw the difference. If it's about the company, it's one thing. If it's about the founders, it's a different story. And overall, I would say, instead of investing a lot of time in, especially these beauty contests, keep working and put on bring good numbers. That's much more effective.
You only have one job. Your job is to make the company succeed. And in the early days, it's building a good product or acquiring customers. And later it's getting the right talent on board, and that's it.
Yeah, and operational excellence. I mean, if you get bigger, of course, then and the organization grows, then of course you have to do certain things. And it's also part of, if you want to get customers and if you want to get good employees, that the people somehow know you. Yeah. Fair enough. So there's no black and white. So.
No. Besides LinkedIn, there's also a TV show here in Switzerland, Höhle der Löwen or Shark Tank from the US. What role do formats like that play? Is that actually helpful to motivate more people to go into entrepreneurship, or is it also a bit distracting or maybe even giving a false image, as LinkedIn sometimes does?
Here again, I think there's no single answer. It has to be balanced. Of course, personally, I believe it helped, entrepreneurs or the entrepreneurial community a lot in the public better understanding how these startup things work. Yeah. So the awareness that you need to raise money in order to grow things, I think that's a very positive aspect. On the other hand, of course, these shows can only last for a certain amount of time. And we all know that it's a show. In the end, it's entertainment.
Exactly.
And so reducing startups to an entertainment format is, of course, it's not doing justice to what you do as an entrepreneur. So here again, it has, of course, positive side and it has also negative side, because to me, it sometimes looks a bit like it's like a game show. Mm-hmm. So it's first you're looking like Germany's next top model, and here you're looking for like Switzerland's next startup, and I don't know whether this is really a good development. Of course, for the awareness in society, it's good, but it's as always very oversimplified. And I wouldn't say it's bad. I wouldn't say it's good. It has both aspects, and it's a balance, you know.
There's no black and white.
No, there's no black and white in that sense. I mean, it of course helps, but on the other hand, it's a really very tough oversimplification of how things work. And, you know, for a lot of people, it looks like you just go to a show and you get your 100,000 or 500,000 or whatever investment you get. And it looks so easy. And we both know that's not the case.
No. Together with Talent Cake, Swisspreneur just released its 5th masterclass. This time on how to create the ideal team framework with your co-founders to ensure future success. It's based on Talent Cake's founders agreement. We've got Talent Cake's CEO Viviana Groppengieser, Yokoi co-founder Melanie Gabriel, and Scandit co-founder Christoph Roduner giving you their first-hand experience on how to align the goals of everyone in your team, how to split roles and responsibilities, and why equity, vesting, and investment are topics you need to discuss from day one. It's an intense team-forming bootcamp, and it's available for free on our website. Click the link in the show notes to start watching it now. I want to close the loop a bit with going back to the Swiss-US comparison. You said, okay, if you go to the US market, you of course have to adapt to the local circumstances, so to speak. And in Switzerland, where it's more about being modest, not bragging, etc. In that sense, the final question on this topic is, by following the Swiss values that we just discussed, does that also mean that we are usually great being second and don't strive to be the number one?
It's a good question. I think in a lot of things we are like really good, especially when it comes like engineering and all these kind of things.
Yeah.
We are probably in other cultural circumstances not the best salespeople.
Exactly.
Because sales is done differently in different countries. So if you go to India or to China or to the US, sales is done differently. And we might, and there, if you're too modest, then it might actually bite you in your behind, you know?
Yeah, they will not take you seriously.
Yes, because there you have to promise everything, and of course, and yeah. So I think that what makes us a lot of times slower and not growing fast. So a lot of Swiss companies are then acquired instead of becoming number one.
Exactly.
Fair enough. And of course, I would wish for Swiss companies, but to me, it shouldn't be the mentality. It's more tactics. So in order to understand that your sales tactics in different markets have to be different and you have to play a different role. It doesn't talk about your character or the way you are as a person. Yeah. But you need to understand that sales tactics in the US is different, and you need to be the best, the biggest, you know, the fastest, the most beautiful company, and you can sell everything. And if the customer says, yeah, can we do that? Yes, of course we can. Even if you didn't develop it, everyone does it. Yeah. So you have also here, you play along the rules. But I think, yes, it's probably hindering us. But nevertheless, in the bigger picture, if you look like Switzerland as the place of stability in the world, is of course also due to this mentality. It's due to this mentality. It's due to the political system we have. It's due to a lot of things that are very Swiss. And that's also a big advantage of us. And, you know, that we're precise and that we're reliable. And if we say we do so, we do so. Yeah. These are all very positive attitudes. But you're right. If you grow internationally and you want to grow as fast as possible, then probably we are not the best in doing that. That's fair enough. We have to accept that. And the question, and would be probably a long discussion whether we should change that.
Yeah.
And I mean, the most successful people probably are able to really adapt that depending on the market they want to do sales in.
I think On is a great example of that, right? Like what they built, for example, on a global scale. It seems very un-Swiss in that sense.
Yeah.
But they did that out of Switzerland. They're still here. They did go public in the US, but the guys are still here, the team.
Yes, and you saw that the mentality, yes, of course, it's an incredible story and it's an incredible entrepreneurial success. And nevertheless, after the exit, it hit them as well. Yeah. Because here again, they probably were not expecting that the Swiss would react like they reacted, where the Americans would never have done that.
Fair.
So here you see the difference in mentality, and I think it's important to understand these differences. And if you choose to live in Switzerland, they will judge you by the Swiss standards, which are different than the standards in the US.
Yeah, fair. Now, if we look a bit into the future, Ronnie, you have your personal holding company, RZ Capital, since 2011. You do real estate and private equity deals, as we heard. So I just also want to hear a bit, what are your plans for the future? What's next? What's coming up in your business, but also private life?
Well, private life, that's an interesting one. Private life, I don't know exactly. I think what Alexandra and I are planning is more like, I want to continue working until I'm 70 or 75 or 80 because I can't stop. I love what I do. And I would probably love, or down the line, to be more flexible in terms of geography, not spending the entire year in Switzerland, but living probably 2-3 places over the year. That's probably on the private side. Business side, yes. I did my first private equity deal 3 years ago, and that's turning out very nice. So here again, having done it once makes kind of appetite for more. So we're always having an eye out there on what to kind of do next in terms of also what makes sense to grow probably at the core, what we already bought or around the core. And then, of course, I think, Silvan, there's one project we share together. So where we do public affairs, AI-based public affairs, and that's something that we are just kicking off. And that's an amazing project. And here again, I always love technology from like very early childhood days. 7 years, I started like hacking on the computer and stuff like that. And so now we're doing these AI things in areas where it's not being used that much. And starting from scratch again. And that's really cool. That's really cool. And I'm really looking forward. And a part of that, I hope to stay healthy. I hope to, be as happy as I am. If I can stay as happy as I'm at the moment for the next 30 years, I would really sign me up for that.
Amazing. And it's really exciting to finally build a company together.
Yes, it's amazing. I'm really enjoying, the entire process. We have been working on it for a couple of months now, and it seems to turn out really nice, and perspectives look good, and so I'm really excited about that.
Same here. To wrap up the conversation, we always have some rapid fire questions that we save for the very end. I give you a short question and you have to answer in one sentence. Okay. You ready?
Yeah.
What's a market that has been interesting to you lately?
India.
Nice. How did you celebrate your exits?
Very quiet. Myself.
Nice. How much sleep did you get last night?
5 hours. I woke up at 4 without alarm clock, and I felt like I get up. Usually I take more.
That's good. What does money mean to you?
Money is like wood. You need it to keep the fire burning.
Nice.
But it's not important apart from that.
Luck or hard work?
Hard work.
Nice. And what are your favorite countries? You mentioned you would like to live in multiple countries. What are your top 3 countries that you would go for?
Switzerland, Canada, and New Zealand.
Beautiful. Ronnie, I know you don't give a lot of interviews, so this really means a lot that you came here on the show with us today. Thank you so much for your time and for the important topics that you addressed that are usually not talked about.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and I really enjoyed that talk. Thanks, Silvan.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, you can support us by rating our show on Apple Podcasts. This way, we can reach an ever-growing number of aspiring entrepreneurs.